I'm Rene Mullen, and this is Pen and Poet. Intimate conversations and performances with poets, both page and stage, established and up and coming. A safe space where you can meet new artists, maybe gain an appreciation for the spoken and written word. This is poetry for the rest of us, the reachable, understandable, digestible poetry.
That night, Zapata washed my feet. Handlebar whiskers scratched the itch between my legs like myth.
On the days of our births, we breathe the dust of these memories, and it scours our flesh, smooths our skins, fills our lungs.
All the dead desire most is to live in our memory. All they desire most is to laugh and to dance.
Hey everyone, Pen and Poet is almost fully up and running again. I started doing interviews over the internet, so you no longer have to be in the Albuquerque area to be on the show. I am also moving into a new house, my first time ever living in a house. I'm so excited. So the show may still continue to be a little bit sporadic, but I am working on new episodes. The first recording I did over the internet a few weeks ago ended up not recording the audio on the new software that I was trying out. But the second interview you're about to hear went on without a hitch. That first interview I am trying to set up to redo so that we can hear them. But in the meantime, since we were having such a good conversation, like Jack Tapestry's interview a few months back, we're just going to pick things up in the middle of our conversation and go from there. Today's interview is with another up-and-coming poet, Joshua Merritt. Joshua Merritt is a spoken word poet whose love of the human experience, food metaphors, and gray areas propelled him into the slam poetry scene. He has shared his work in a few slams across the country and currently calls Portland, Oregon home. You can find his work recorded here for the first time. I'm really excited about that. And am likely to see him at poetry events around the Portland area. So if you like what you hear today, please, 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 if you're in the Portland area, check him out. With that, here's my interview with Joshua Merritt.
I get to be a poet and I get to explore like deep emotion, and even though I feel like a little bit like a freak in general populations, because I'm like, but really, let's feel our feelings. Like, let's like go all the way into them and roll around in them and then dive extra deep into them. And, and everybody's like, what? I just wanted a taco. What are we doing here? So yeah. But it's beautiful because then I get to meet other people who exist on that plane and can speak to their emotions and who see the connectivity of life. And it's rare, but it's amazing. That's poetry, and the people who exist in that world, specifically spoken word poetry. For me, it's like church to me. Like, I grew up in, church and was very much a part of that tradition. And then when I kind of walked away from that space for a number of different reasons, mainly because I'm super gay, but also because I felt like I could see aspects of my belief deteriorating at the edges, like kind of crumbling a little bit. When I left, where was I going with this story? I can't remember now. This is part of it. Oh, poetry, right. When I left that, yes. I really had like a gap in my identity. Like, I was used to gathering in groups of people and like hearing at the time what I believed to be truth, but was really just kind of a mix of truth and also like people in my idea, like enforcing a little bit of control in my life, or like imposing what they thought was the best version of humanity on me. I needed a community again. Like, I had lost this, like, really, for all of its negative parts, like, church can be a super great, like, hub of meeting people and gathering and having commonalities. And when I lost that, I found spoken word soon after that. And it was like, wow, it's like all of the community of church, but like we celebrate our dysfunction and humanity here, and like it's really, really amazing and beautiful. And I don't feel like I have to be anybody other than who I am. And that I don't feel like I'm working to be somebody that is better, stronger, faster, like all of these things, like because I have some deficit to overcome. I'm just here and I'm experiencing other people's stories, and I'm trying to give voice to my own story, and we're celebrating each other. And that to me is like, that's actually church. So I
Agreed.
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. That's kind of what drew me into the poetry community as well, once I actually got started. And I have a feeling that since you've already told a couple of really good stories, I'm going to basically just cut right into
Okay.
part of this. Um, but so typically, how I play it out is now everybody gets to hear what I do offline now. Typically, what I have folks do is kind of read a poem here or there so that we can
Mm-hmm.
kind of get to know you.
Sure.
I don't think I mentioned this ahead of time, but if you have any kind of geared up, if we could hear one just so that we can kind of get to know you before we dive further into kind of
Okay.
when you started with poetry and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this one is called Six Onward. It's also fondly known as the tomato poem. So I will just
Did
jump
I
right in.
actually hear this
You
at
heard this one.
that? Okay, I thought I did. Okay, go for
Yeah.
it.
It was in kindergarten where, among sandboxes and hidden desires for oversized Lisa Frank folders, I received my formal education on fruits and vegetables, along with the alphabet and basic color, all together with too slow narration from a teacher I would have taken a bullet for. She was beautiful and kind, a benevolent giant in my 3 foot nothing world. Her name was Miss Berger, and she moved to Michigan to get married. I still remember the postcard she sent me after her wedding. R was for red, S was for spinach, T was for tomato. T was the nemesis of my 6-year-old brain. How could this be? Tomatoes? A fruit? Never. It was a betrayal of nature, and I could not stand for it. There needed to be recategorization. Never in my life would I think of taking a nice fat bite out of that would-be half-cousin of a grape. Vine or no vine, there's no way you could convince me that Welch's and Prego had anything in common. And just like with everything else in my life, I fought. I reasoned. I questioned well beyond the realm of comfortable conversation. After all, as I was reminded, it was just a tomato. If there were to be a monument erected in honor of my 6-year-old self, I imagine it would be of me with an inconsolable look of horror, staring at a zucchini next to a tomato, realizing that in some people's estimation, this too could be considered a fruit. You can imagine how I reacted when I realized I was gay. Reactions included, but are not limited to: am I still a man? Was I ever a man? Do I need to wax my eyebrows now? How does this work? This explains my untamed desire to belt. My heart will go on in the shower. Am I a man? Am I a real man? L lover, M man, N not a man, O over it, P pissed off, Q queer, R regret, S someone, T tomato. Sweet Lord, I am the tomato. I am the fruit that few are comfortable categorizing, including myself. I wished for many years that I was sweet instead of savory, that I was not placed in this awkward middle ground where God is used like a hammer, and my feelings are welded into shackles out of the heat of the stares I got because I broke out that part of my wardrobe that's too gay for their taste. At least I didn't get chased this time. Miss Berger, I wonder where you are. If you're still with that man from Michigan, if you still talk slow and kind, if you realize that it was worth the conversations you had with me about tomatoes. If you look at tomatoes and think of me even as you suddenly become exhausted, if you knew I liked boys, or would like boys, if you know how much you mean to me. I can tell you some things about tomatoes. They grow best next to basil, each enhancing the flavor of the other. My favorite way to eat them is with a little salt and a lot of cheese. I have yet to exhaust my experimentation with their various uses, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you can find sun gold tomatoes ripe and perfectly balanced for eating by themselves. I am not a tomato. I am a man. And every night in my dreams, I see you, I feel you. I pluck, I don't wax. I am a man, a real man.
Awesome. It took every ounce of me not to laugh at several parts.
I was waiting. It's honestly reading that in a non like audience setting is really like difficult for me at parts because it's I depend a little too much on audience feedback, I feel like. So that took some discipline myself.
I actually, I think most performance poets feel that way. And I used to kind of stifle all of my laughter or any of that kind of reaction when people would come in and do poetry when we were standing across from each other. But then I had Rich Boucher, who is a straight up performance poet, and he loves awkwardness and he loves funny. And I usually just close my eyes and take it all in. And he did this really long pause during this poem about like Abraham Lincoln's Speedo. And it was this ridiculously long pause, and I thought it was over, and I opened my eyes after like 20 seconds, and he's just staring me down. And so after that, I realized I need to kind of engage folks, but at the same time, I want everybody to hear the whole poem. But
you're like, it's this really hard translation of this poem that's like meant to be heard in a group, but you're also trying to get it out to the world. Yeah, I feel you.
Exactly. And there's so much I want to unpack that kind of come up with this poem. One, I think we'll just start with Ms. Berger because I think teachers need to kind of be commended when they do awesome. So I want to talk about your
I was
how
in
she was
love with
important to
her. I was in love, Rene. I think she's the only woman that I will ever love in that way. But like it was like this child, like I just remember her. So I had her for kindergarten and first grade. And I remember like being this like emotional little child when I found out that like kids change teachers every year. That I was like, no, like you can't, we have like a thing going. Like she's awesome. Like I'm her right hand man. I make sure the cubbies are like clean. Like this shit is real. Like she is my go-to girl. Like we have to keep this relationship alive. And then when I found out that I was going to get to keep her as a teacher into first grade, that she was moving up with a majority of her students, I was like, I just won the lottery. Like you all don't even know. Like, can this keep happening? Like, I need her until like I graduate high school. Like, that would be okay with me. Yeah, I was just like super big fan of hers. And then I like gave her the biggest hug and cried when I found out she was moving away to get married. Because like A, it's a betrayal that she's moving, and B, you have another man in your life. Like, what is going on? So yeah, but it's funny because she actually did send me this like big, really adorable, like chunky postcard. It wasn't even like a flat postcard. It was like almost made of like, you know, those trifold boards that have like it's like a thick, like shiny material. Like it was printed on one of those. Like she must have spent like premium postage money to get that to me. That was easily a 2-stamp card, and I was just a big fan of hers. Yeah. I haven't talked to her since. I don't know where she is, and I do know that her last name, I won't say her new last name because I don't know if that's like a privacy thing or whatever, but her name previously was Miss Berger. And yeah, I was just a big fan. She had a really formative or I had a really formative experience in her class. So it was a part of like, I was learning a lot of like like being socialized to like certain things and not like certain things at the same time that I was in her class. Like I remember, you know, in the poem it talks about Lisa Frank folders, and all I wanted, like not just folders, but like pencil boxes. Like I don't know if you, yeah, like if you have kids or remember that time when Lisa Frank was like a huge thing, and like there were backpacks, there were whatever, and it's like now I recognize it as like this bougie way to, you know, get children to spend like $180 on a backpack that is covered in glittery animals made in different colors. But like, it's still like when you're a child, it's like, no, this is everything to me. And
Yeah, I actually had to Google what a Frank Lisa folder was.
yeah, it's covered. It's covered in glittery, multicolored shit. Like that is the whole Lisa Frank way. It's like purple and pink and yeah, it's really good. But I don't know. Yeah, it resonated to me. Like everybody remembers. I think most gay people remember like feeling different in some way or another when they're growing up, in terms of what they like versus what other people like. And for me, it was definitely like I loved hanging out with women. I loved all the things that women got to do. All of my girlfriends liked hanging out with me, but I noticed that like most of the boys were hanging out with other guys, and so I was like, I don't know exactly why I feel more comfortable in this space. I think part of it really was like I refused. I'm a chatty Cathy, so stop me at any time. But
Nope, keep going.
I remember like having a distinctive thought because I always looked up to my mom, and like most to this day it remains true that most formative figures in my life are women. And I remember just seeing them embrace their emotion and embracing like the ability to process his emotions openly, the ability to process emotions openly, the ability to, you know, connect with themselves and other people on a deep level. And I remember thinking like, if I have to squash that out of myself, then I don't want to be a man. If that's the definition of manhood that I have to follow in order to be accepted, then screw it. Like I'm not putting my chips into that pot. Like I am leaving, I'm taking my toys with me. Like if you can't accept me as I am, then I will go to where like the brightly colored unicorns and like fun emotional conversations are happening. Yeah.
That's cool because I confess I'm a cis white guy, but I have quite a bit of femininity about me, and just even still being cis, I still feel like any femininity I do have in the poetry community, it's not even like a second thought from anybody. It you just are who you are, and all of the glory and the weirdness and all of the anything in between is just kind of part of who you are, and there's no weird glances or anything at any point.
Isn't
But
that
yeah,
magical?
It is, and I love it. And I've only been in the community for about 3 years because I kind of fell into it when I went to some semifinals poetry slam here in Albuquerque, and I was just watching it. And then I mentioned something on Facebook, and one of my other writer friends said, "I've always wanted to do poetry slam too." So next month we just both showed up at a poetry slam and failed miserably, but
I love
haven't
that.
stopped since.
So do you want to hear something that's a little gross, but also like it has its own like moments? It's not really gross per se. I just utilize that word, but this was my very first poem that I wrote, and I wrote it in one sitting in 2 hours.
Uh-oh. All right, let's do it.
No. That poem that I just read to you.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
I hate you. I hate you a lot
No,
right now.
but don't, because literally, like, everyone calls it the tomato poem or my signature poem. And I was talking to my husband about this earlier, and I was like, I will never do that again. Like, that was like, I feel like I birthed a baby. Like, I was late to work the next day, and people were like, whoa, were you like drinking? What was happening? I was like, no, I was up till 3 a.m. writing this stupid damn poem. And like, now I can't get it out of my head and I have to perform it. But like, most of the time I write like half a poem, and then I'll write another poem later, and I'll end up finding out like the two are actually supposed to be the same poem, and then I'll reorganize them, and that's how it ends up coming together. That was just a freakish like one-off that also happens to be like, my mom is like, I just love that poem so much. I don't know. Like, you're just never like, she's like, all of your other work is so amazing, but I just don't know if you'll ever get there again. And I'm like, thank you. I appreciate that. She's actually one of the most supportive people in the world. So it's not a dig at me. She's just like, loves that poem. So
that's awesome that it sounds like you actually have a very supportive family roots, which is way cool.
yeah.
So when actually did you start in the poetry community or in performance poetry or poetry in general?
So luckily I date my poems when I read them. So 2012.
Oh, wow.
I read in Massachusetts. I was part of in Northampton. There's a poetry community out there. They used to meet at this bar called The Hinge, and it was like this 3-story bar. I think the same poetry group is still going, but they're at a different bar and it's led by different people and everything. But yeah, I just started going there like every week, and it was like I couldn't get enough of it. And I remember just these poets, all of them had such different styles. Like one of them, like Christina, she was just like so amazing at like love poems and like heartbreak poems and like really emotional like stuff that just connected with like loss. And then there was another guy who was more, I don't know what this style of poetry is, but it's more about the rhythmic nature of the words and the feelings that they evoke, and it's less about like that they make sense in like a normal linguistic way. But it was really amazing and beautiful in its own right. And then like my actual like most formative moment with the poetry community was like, I remember going to that group, and this one guy just got up there and screamed a poem into the microphone for 3 minutes. And like they applauded afterwards, and everybody was like, you needed to get that out. Like, obviously that was like a thing. And I was like, I thought I was going to die. Like, I was in the front row. I thought I was going to die. Like, and he was just super angry. And then he kept coming back and like had some really beautiful stuff that he like shared afterwards, like more poetry that was different and varied. And I don't know. I was hooked on it from that point. But then I'm really kind of a transient spirit. So I just pop up on the map every once in a while. I left after about like 6 months to a year in that community, found a poetry slam in like Gilbert randomly in Arizona, and like won that at a local community college. And then the reason that I got into the Albuquerque scene really quickly, I moved like a month or two after I read, but I randomly went to that slam that was the Last Chance Slam and won it, which is how I ended up getting to that finals night. So I'm kind of a wacky like pop-up poet that just go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to actually bring up that, that being the first slam that you did here in town, at least that I knew of. And then I think it was the same week or the next week, you were on the final stage. And so had you been in Albuquerque long? Had you been kind of
For
out
like
of the poetry scene?
Oh yeah, I hadn't read to an audience in 3 years.
Wow. What made you go then?
I just needed to get back up on stage. Like I had a few years where I had to like set aside a bunch of my stuff, and I was like working full time, going to school full time, trying to get a job that paid me more than like $10 an hour. Like all of this stuff collided, and at once I had a relationship pop up that turned into being my husband, and that like takes a lot of time and energy to cultivate. And poetry just unfortunately took a back seat in that moment because I just needed to gain a little bit of stability in my life in order to. But it's good. I'm in a very different place than I was when I wrote Six Onwards. So it's also been I've been in the process of. I'll share a new piece with you that I just finished actually a couple days ago.
Bring it on.
That's more of where I am right now. And then at the end, whenever we get to the like third poetry part, I'll share like a happier one because I can actually do like happy poetry. But okay. In church, I remember being preached to on more than one occasion. Don't be a salad bar Christian. Don't take half of Luke and most of Mark, a little Isaiah. That prophet flew in a motherfucking flaming chariot after all, and call it a day. If you want to be a real Christian, you have to read it all, learn it all, live it all. The idea that some of the Bible might have a couple little pieces of contentious rhetoric was whoop off the table. It wasn't up to me if I wanted my green goddess topped goodness with the genocide on the side. My plate had been made for me. So I spooned the sins of ancient generations into my body. I didn't know that a side effect of certainty was blindness. Couldn't understand that when God gave the prophet Paul his sight again, it cost me my own. Could not have comprehended that I don't know was the concept which would weave an anchoring line, fastening me to my humanity, to our humanity. Not knowing can be everything you need. I am not touting willing ignorance here. It's just that false assuredness is still more toxic. You are where you are, right? There is no roadmap that can lead you correctly if you convince yourself you're in Portland when you're really in Phoenix. Siri can't help you rise from those ashes. So I celebrate our finite, dazzling impetuousness. I am not always suited for truth that comes from chapters and books. My love for all of who you are, for all of who I am, is worth my condemnation. I don't think that is the end, but all the same, it's worth the risk.
That is awesome. And feel free to tell me that it's off limits, but you bring up religion a lot, and I'm curious to know, because it sounds like you actually have a good, positive family situation, especially with your mom. I'm curious how, even though you have this contentious piece for the religion that you probably grew up with, where I don't even know how to ask this. Is it still a part of your life? Is it still a part of, have you kind of come to, I don't know if come to terms with it, or if have they come to terms with you maybe? Like, how does that
a fun fact about my family is that I was actually the last person in my immediate family to leave the church.
Oh. So
I'm in a very kind of also another unique fact that's not common, I think, in the gay community is my parents, my mom and my dad, were the first two people that I came out to when I was 16. And I had a very contentious relationship with my dad growing up. And my mom is like still to this day my best friend. But to my father's credit, with all of the like arguments and screaming matches we had growing up, like one of his most defining positive moment in my life specifically was when I came out to him and he just started crying and he looked at me and was like, "What do you need?"
Wow.
And that was it. Like that was like it was just everything else was assumed to be fine. Like we were fine. Like as a family, like that was not who I was not like a factor that pushed me out of the family, or that, you know, that I was no longer worthy of being his son. Like it was very like we still fought like cats and dogs, but it had nothing to do with the fact that I was gay. Like that, for whatever reason, it still to this day boggles my mind, because I have a much better relationship with him now. Like there are just
Mhm.
certain human beings that shouldn't live in the same house together, and I recognize that like we are those two people. But like now, like, but you know, my sister and my mom um were never, you know, that was never in question to me, that they would accept me. It was like this big question mark whether or not my dad was, and that was a huge healing moment for me, to be able to like take that moment of
Wow.
relief and know that I was safe to figure out, okay, what do I do now within the confines of my family. So
That's
um
amazing. I'm under the impression that most folks do not have that same
yeah,
um,
I would say that that's a fairly rare occurrence,
yeah.
especially in like, we were a fairly Christian family, but
Mhm.
my my parents my parents are like grew up in LA during like a lot of the LA riots, and like were very exposed to like diversity of all sorts. Like my mom had, you know, multiple gay friends growing up, and like they were in the minority as white people, like in a lot of the public schools that they went to. And so then, you know, fast forward, we moved to white Mormon Gilbert. And like, so my home life as a culture was very different than like my very, you know, like generic safe life like out in my community. And so they like, I think that is what saved me in amongst all of that, is that they had made friends with, and like, you know, it was their life for so long, being in like LA, being in the midst of like really powerfully different people than they were. And so I benefited from their exposure to different races, different religions, different like sexualities, different backgrounds. Like my mom, my dad certainly still had work to do in terms of like using the word gay as a pejorative. Like he has
Yeah.
evolved so much since then. So I don't
Mhm.
want to say that he was like perfect by any means, but he's done a lot of work. Like I'm super proud of him. So that, yeah,
And I'm super happy for you to have that sort of uh, um, I don't even know situation, that sort of outcome
yeah.
uh, for
But
with
in terms of
parents like
like, yeah, in terms of like religion, though, I mean, I've been working for a while to come up with the correct words. Like this poem really, to me, embodies the idea that I've been working on for a while. That like the phrase "I don't know" is actually one of the best phrases to utilize often.
yeah.
If you truly if you truly don't know, if you're not 100% certain, then like being curious and just being open to the possibility of being wrong,
Mhm.
especially in the political climate that we're in right now, especially in, you know, like in conversations with people that you don't necessarily like agree with. I don't think that it is I don't think that certainty and beating people over the head with certainty um, ever leads you to an end goal that you would desire. Um, like
So true.
I don't think that means that you give up what you know is right or wrong. But seeing people through the lens of like, maybe they don't know as well. Maybe they're trying to create stability and certainty out of nothingness, just like you are, and trying to find their way. And um, imposing realities on people is like a tall order that ends dangerously a lot of the time. So
Yeah, yeah. And let's see. I kind of want to switch gears a tad because you
Yeah,
wanted to
go for it.
talk, and I kind of want to talk about the type of poetry you write. Because at least so far, all I know of you is your performance poetry, and it may just be
Uh-huh.
that. And I don't mean just as a bad thing, but I mean, are you a performance poet? Do you have other poetry as well? Like, where do you land, and what kind of poetry are you into?
So I ascribe to, well, my two favorite poets, I would say, are Sarah Kay was the reason that I thought that I could write spoken word poetry. Like her TED Talk. I don't know if you are familiar with it.
It sounds familiar, but I listen to all the TED Talks, so
Yeah,
I'm a
there's a lot
TED
of them.
Talk guy.
But
Yeah.
she does one about her and her mother. That has a lot of like superhero allegories in it. Like Wonder Woman is a big reoccurring theme in there. And I remember being young and writing a lot of like written, like read it off the page poetry. And and I always I call it like the Alanis Morissette effect. Like, but most people can't do it well. I say that loosely. Like where, like I remember Jagged Little Pill coming out, and like it was just anger. Like that's what I felt when I listened to it. Was just like pure anger, but it was so like well done and distilled in such a way that it was like really, really like absolutely what it needed to be. But for me, like life is in layers, and a lot of my poetry I realized could be most effective when you mix humor and happiness and sadness and awkwardness and like a little like sarcasm, but also a little like self-deprecation. Like most of life is felt in layers at the same time.
Yeah.
And if I channel one emotion in a poem, it's not going to be, at least I am not capable of writing a poem that is authentic with just one emotion. And I tried to do that for so long. And then when I found spoken word, I recognized that my poetry, I'm an auditory learner. I also like think best when I'm talking out loud. Like I make connections that I didn't make before they actually exited my mouth when I say them. And so a lot of the time, spoken word just makes sense to me in my reality. Like I experience the world through sound. And so the hardest part to me is oftentimes like distilling the words down into what will actually be the most meaningful to other people and the most accessible to other people. I don't know if I'm rambling now. You can like reroute me at any time, but it's a very nebulous thing.
Yeah, and that was actually something that I had written down that I wanted to mention, that you do kind of play the sort of funny and touching all at the same time, that I still haven't mastered, because everybody who knows my poetry knows that I'm just the guy who does the really sad shit. And
Oh God, but like when I listen to you speak, Rainey, I literally am just like sitting there like I wish I could be this sad and authentic at once. Like I feel this way sometimes, but if I'm not, if like you do it well, like it's amazing. Like what you do is so incredible, but like
thank you.
it's just not, it doesn't come across as authentic when I do it because I project myself externally very positively, and a lot of people would be, I've had friends who I've known for years express shock that I would struggle with depression, not so much anxiety because I'm pretty high strung, but that I would have any level of depression in there because I'm just like a little Energizer bunny. And but I'm like internally like quite self-critical and dark. But the way that I cope with that in my internal dialogue a lot of the time is by making really self-deprecating or quirky jokes about life, or just like me and my mom, like, well, luckily we share this dark humor. So whenever I'm like careening down a path of like everything's blowing up and I don't know what's happening, I'll be like, one step closer to the grave, Mom, and she knows, she'll literally be like, yes, I understand what you're saying, like, and she'll laugh with me. So that's authentic to me. Like whenever I'm in the thralls of like my deepest pain, I'm also experiencing like a level of humor.
That's awesome. And that's actually a lot of my favorite performance poetry, even though I've never been able to pull it off. I think there's even there's a local poet that actually mentions Scrubs as that sort of poetry where, you know, it's all funny and fun and games, and then like gut punches with the serious stuff. So I wish, and I've tried a couple of times, and I think I've almost had it a couple of times, but I don't do those poems anymore because I don't like them. So I think for me, it's just gotta be dark. It's who I am.
That's okay. It's okay though, because you do it we were sitting in the audience. I remember that night, clear as a bell, and me and my mom just like grabbed each other's hands, and my friend Ananda is sitting right next to me, and I grab her hand and I'm just weeping, like, and I'm like, it's okay if I like don't win this tonight because there's just so many people here who are so talented.
Yeah. And I actually have to say,
it was such a good night of poetry.
Yeah, I didn't actually go to the Last Chance Slam, and then I went to, while I was on the final stage with you, and I saw you, and I was like, who the hell is this guy? And it was just like, where did you come from? How did you manage to? And then, you know, it came out that you had won first place at the Last Chance Slam, and I'm still wondering, who the is this dude? And I heard your stuff, and I was like, how has he not done poetry in this town yet? So yeah, I was also flabbergasted that I got to see you and hear you, but also wonder where the hell, like, what rock did you crawl out of to just randomly win a Last Chance and then make it on the final stage and then again disappear a month later?
Oh, I just, you know, it's part of the magic. I just do what I can. But I think her name is Patricia Smith is the other one that like is my super informative. Like okay, and you'll think that this is weird. I pop up in the most random places. So I was 20 at the time in 2012 when I had just started doing that. And the National Poetry Slam was in Boston that year. Of all times, one of the 3 years that I was in Massachusetts. And so my friend from a nonprofit that I worked for previously was like, do you want to go to the Cantab Lounge for one of the opening nights? And I was like, absolutely, I'm there. And then we got there and I found out it was a bar. And I luckily had been growing out my facial hair because the guy at the door like asked for my ID and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like I left it. And he's like, no problem. Go ahead. It's like poetry night. Like, let's do this. And I was like, sweet, awesome. Like, oh. And so then I just wanted to be in the room. And then I ended up getting picked as a judge because I was one of like 5 people who didn't know anybody in there. And then Patricia Smith was the sacrificial poet of the night.
Oh, I love hearing
and she read her poem about cornbread and dancing on her father's feet. And I literally was like, I had an out-of-body experience. Who, like, what? Like, how is anybody going to beat this? And then everybody's like, oh yeah, she's won like the whole thing. Like many times. Like she's like the guru, like the end all be all of like, and I was like, yes. Like, I was like, is it bad that we all gave her 10s at the first poem that's read and we're like, done. We're done. We can go home, right? So, but it was so, I mean, and then like the rest of the poetry was like just fabulous. Like it was such amazing poets, obviously.
And Boston's got an awesome community too.
Yeah. So but she's another one that I just like YouTube stalked the crap out of her work. But she does this thing where like you end up starting to find styles that you're like, I could never do this, but I just appreciate it. She does multi-voice. Like she can draw in the perspective of different personas so convincingly.
Yeah. There are a couple of
And
poets
like,
that do that, and I wish I could, but
yeah, it's
that's
not in the cards. Like for me at least, I'm just like, but you find what you can do really well, and
Yeah.
you just like you have to own that. Like I am the dark, funny, happy, sad, wacky, slightly distasteful poet. So it is what it is. Like I own that, and I try to capitalize on like my own, bit in the world.
That is awesome. Let's see. I don't know if there's a whole lot else I intended to cover. Is there anything that you wanted to chat about that we haven't? Well, is there anywhere where we can find either you or any of your stuff online?
On your podcast.
Okay.
I'm not really prolific online. I haven't really had. I tried to find a video of me doing another poem called Comeback. That was actually the poem that I read that won me the Last Chance Slam. But no, I don't think I'm online anywhere. But if you want to like email me, I can put my email in the link of the podcast or whatever. If people are like, send me more of your work, then maybe I'll record something for you.
And I can certainly, folks can reach out to me as well. But hey, that
That's
means
perfect.
I have exclusive.
You
to
really
all of your
do. Yeah. I'm trying to be better about it. You are my first step towards being better about my poetry, Rene. So
Yay, you need to make a blog and like start submitting stuff because your stuff is really good. You need to get it.
Thank you.
So are you active then in Portland?
Yeah, I just recently went to its Portland Poetry Slam. They've had a lot of competitions surrounding. I think there's like a poetry competition in San Diego. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, individual world poetry.
Yes. So they had a qualifying slam a couple weeks ago. That was the last one that I went to, and I didn't read. I just judged there because I didn't know anybody. But I'm definitely going to be popping up here and there on Sundays because they have readings every Sunday. So that's probably where you will find me if you want to hear anything. But
there you go. So
none of them know me from Adam right now. So if anybody from there listens to this, I apologize. But also, you poets who read at Portland Poetry Slam are mad skilled. So I love you all, and I can't wait to join your ranks.
So people can find you if they go to Oregon. They can hunt you down at the slams. There you go.
And occasionally, maybe I still fly back for work every once in a while to Albuquerque. So,
and you'll have to kind of coordinate it somehow so that you show up to one of the slams. And there are a bunch of new slams in town. They've actually started a second slam organization here in town. So there's like 4 or 5 slams a month now. It's crazy.
That's amazing. Well, just wherever Rene is when I'm in town is where I'm going to be. Basically, if he knows of any poetry slams, then I will be at that slam.
Brilliant. Were there any other topics you wanted to cover before we heard that happy poem from you?
I don't think so. We did religion. We did like gayness. We did mental health. Yeah, I think we did a really good job of covering most of it.
Yeah, and covered some of like your favorites or influences, which I try to get from folks as well, because part of what I'm trying to do with this podcast is like poetry that I want to hear, but also, both page poets and performance poets and the ones in the middle and ones that aren't really well known yet, and also getting people who don't think they like poetry to kind of dig things. So I like to hear what everybody else is listening to or reading so that folks can be like, I like their poems, so maybe I'll like the stuff that they like. So
absolutely.
It's my attempt.
That's amazing. I think it's a valiant effort. And I usually tell people if you think you hate poetry, you probably just haven't searched hard enough. although we are a really hard bunch to nail down. So I suppose there's that too. I'm not an exception to that, as evidenced by my transient lifestyle. So.
And that's how I was. I didn't even do poetry until that poetry slam thing happened back in 2015, because for the same reason, like the poets that I had been introduced to were ones that I found kind of boring and dull, and I didn't understand them, so I didn't get into it. But once I found the poetry slam community, then I started getting into it, and now I'm starting to find that some of those tougher to understand poets, I'm starting to like them a little more now.
Yes.
But yeah.
Oh, there is one more thing I wanted to say really quick that we could talk about.
Absolutely.
I always find it fascinating that some poems read really well in front of some audiences and really poorly in front of others.
Yeah.
It was really funny to me. So I had a different set at our poetry slam that we read at it together versus at the Last Chance Slam.
At the bar.
Yes.
Because that one was at Tractor, right?
Yes. And I should have known better. I'm not going to like call out the demographic, but there was like a very specific demographic of people that judged that slam. And like, my poem, which I'm not going to read right now, had some pretty like it was just some like risque sexual stuff that I had not tested in front of an audience before, but really wanted to just get out there. And my second poem that I read, and it didn't go well for me that night. But it's funny because I've also read that in one other audience, and it went really well. And so I think the big lesson to me in general is that you have to just read what you came to read. And if you happen to like move forward, that's amazing. And if you don't, then like, that's also totally okay. Okay. And that art is definitely like, it's subjective, right? Like it's really hard to get like a read on what will read well and what won't. Like I know that tomato poem that I read first always hits a home run. Like I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's I mean, I know why, but I don't always know why like that is so universal and like well accepted. But it's just funny. That would be the other bit that I would state is like being brave with the content that you bring to a stage can sometimes backfire on you, but it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I actually have the same issue. Like I said, most of my poems are really sad and dark, and I cut my teeth at Tractor at that slam back in 2015. And yeah, doing sad, mopey poems at a bar when people are there to drink don't go over too well. But when I do manage to
but they're so good.
But when I manage to get onto, say, the final stage at the Outpost, where it's a whole different demographic of audience members,
they destroy. They do so well.
Yeah. Well, this time they did well. I was on that same final stage the year before and totally bombed. One, because I went first, and two, because Matthew Brown went second. And I don't know if you're familiar with Matthew Brown. He's actually
but he's amazing.
He's actually the first poet to make me cry, and it was at Tractor. It was like the second slam that I went to, and I don't even know what poem he did. I think all he did was mention the word depression, and I just lost it and just started bawling it in the bar. And ever since then, I've loved his stuff. And then I found out that he doesn't actually go to a lot of slams, again, for the same anxiety reasons that I don't do many. So to hear that someone that powerful that has been on teams and has won stuff still kind of has that sort of, I don't feel good enough to go, was just, I don't even know where I was going with that, but yeah.
Rejection is hard, end of the day. Yeah. Like it's just, it leaves you like it took me like a month to recover from that slam. Like to be like, you're okay. You have stuff of worth and value to like propose, and like people don't hate you because you're gay or because you've slept with a lot of people. Like it's all right. Like you're gonna be fine. So yeah, but it's just part of it. Like it like simultaneously, I just got exposed to all of these like brilliant. Oh my god, that night was just like, what is the name of? She has short hair. She was one of your teammates in
Uh,
the. Are we allowed to say names
yeah,
on
yeah.
here?
Are you talking Gabe? Uh, they do some poems about their
Like I
queerness
want a
as well.
brown boy.
Oh, I want a brown boy. That was Sophia Nuanez.
God, she
Yes.
is feeds my like
Ah,
she just like I was like after I listened to her stuff, I was talking to this about my husband too. This is just gonna be like the end of this podcast is just gonna be me fangirling over like all of you poets like that I barely even got to meet. And I like listened to her stuff and I was just like, I feel transported. Like I don't even know Spanish and I understand her. Like when she's talking, like the feeling
mm,
that she gets, she weaves multiple languages into poems in ways that are so
yeah,
accessible.
yeah.
And like, I just lost my damn mind. Like all of them, all of you guys that like, I could say that about every single one of you that won that night. Like I just, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I
No, this
digress.
is good because I am going to share that with Sophia. Uh, I don't know. I'm sure it's still out there somewhere, but we had created a CD of some of our indie stuff as well as our group pieces so that we could try to raise money. So I bet you I can hunt that down for you and probably get you a copy. That way, there you can
Yeah, I
have
will buy it.
that.
Don't even worry about it.
That way, there you can have
I
a
would
few of
pay
her
good money
pieces.
for it.
Yeah, and
Yay!
she even did at least two. I think she actually did three group pieces. So you'd hear, I think, a total of 6 of her things, including that "I Want Me a Brown Boy" poem, which
Mm.
does always do well,
She
no
made
matter
me
where she
want a
goes.
brown boy. Lord have mercy. I was like, girl, you're speaking my language. I don't even know. Like, oh, she's so talented. So
Yeah, and
talented.
and you would think that I would get bored because during the rehearsals for our team stuff, you basically meet once or twice a week and just pound out poem after poem after poem, the same ones over and over again. And you would think I would get tired of their stuff, but I never did. I kept hearing like new bits that I hadn't heard before and getting chills in different parts. So yeah,
Mm,
I mean, even hearing it 100 times now, it
you're
still
making me
gets me.
jealous. Can I just sit there and hear it 100 times in a day? I just like want to like bask in that for like a hot minute.
Yeah, once you get that CD, then you'll have it and you can just play them all on repeat.
Done. Done. I actually do that. My husband hates me for it. I had for a while in my 89 Toyota Corolla, I had 3 CDs. I had like Adele's 19, I had the
Mhm.
very best of Fleetwood Mac, and I had Beyonce self-titled in there. And I think he was about ready to rip my throat out by the end of like a year of just having those 3 on repeat. But
Oh
I
my god.
obsess about stuff that I really love, so that will probably happen.
Yeah.
Um,
Sophia will be
okay,
very happy to hear that.
I love you, Sophia. I don't like, I've met you like for like 1/2 of 1 second, but yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let's see. Yeah, why don't we kind of end on a good note? And you said you had one more poem of
yep,
probably a happy nature. We'll hear that and we'll kind of
yes.
say our goodbyes.
uh, it's already been an hour. It's like crazy to me that it's already been an
I
hour.
know it doesn't feel
It's
like it.
probably not crazy to the audience. I like talk to, oh my God, I just talk nonstop. All right, so this is called Regulars. To triple venti 1%, 1 raw sugar latte, the only thing better than your dresses are your stories of Rome, of birds and men and sound. My coworker went to high school with your son and didn't like him very much. He brought too much black and white into her gray. Dear iced venti chai with the morning bun, I love that you think I'm worth a $60 bouquet of roses. I love that you get excited when I have your drink ready for you when you walk up. I could listen to you talk for hours, but you wouldn't because you're too interested in how I'm doing. Thank you for treating me well, and thank you for bringing in that honey sweet Southern accent every day. Iced venti unsweetened black tea. You smell so good. You make me want to lie down face first on the floor. I couldn't help dropping your cup, and then dropping your other cup, and then dropping the tea shaker, and then dropping the pitcher of black tea. When I say have a nice day, I really mean take me with you. When we make eye contact, my lips can't really move, which is a shame. Call me. 2 pump vanilla non-fat with whip caramel macchiato. I don't like you at all. I don't have a particular reason, I just don't. Don't get me wrong, you bring in the papers every day and you laugh a lot at my jokes and it takes the edge off. My version doesn't make sense to me either and it reminds me how flawed I am. Venti iced coffee that changes every day and strawberry passion tea blended lemonade. I wish I could wake up every morning to the sound of you two laughing. You would make the Gilmore Girls jealous. People don't take care of one another like that anymore. People don't carry one another's legacy like that anymore. Grande Dark Roast. You ask for advice from all of us every day. I don't mind being your $2.08 therapist because I realize you are outwardly as lost as I am internally at times. And even though the coffee rotation timer has gone off, and we need more hot cup sleeves from the massive pile of boxes that just came off the delivery truck, the piles that keep getting delivered to your life store might go unpacked with you as you leave. And right now, that's more important than hot cup sleeves or the line to the door. At least it should be. You need a smile and maybe a self-deprecating joke. So the guy behind you tapping his foot can go fuck himself because you mean something. And so does he, but it's your turn.
Awesome. Yay. That was good. Yeah, that was one of the ones you sent me, and I was happy that I got to hear it. 'Cause, I don't know, a lot of performance pieces, you don't feel it as much if they're not actually being performed.
Yes, mine is very like guilty of that, I think. Like my when I read mine on a page, I was like, oh God. Like when I transcribe my stuff for you, I'm a terrible speller. And I also like forget punctuation a lot of the time when I'm in an artistic mindset. Like, and I always handwrite all of my poetry, which is kind of weird. I guess, but like it's because I rearrange so much of it. And so when I actually transcribe it and I have to like decide on line breaks in a Word document and like realize how many punctuation and weird errors I made, like I kind of freak out a little bit because I'm like, I was like in AP English, right? Like I know how to write. Like this is not, but I just get in this fervor where I'm like, it's like the spelling doesn't matter to me. The punctuation doesn't matter to me. Like I know when I read a poem off a page, like it's almost like coming back to a string of thoughts and the typos and everything like that makes sense to me in my head. Yeah. So I usually read off of my handwritten page because it's like coming back to something that it's just muscle memory. Like my eyes remember the parts that I messed up and it's kind of like meeting an old friend. So
that's awesome. Josh, thank you so much for reaching out to me and for sharing all of your story and your poetry. And I am hoping to make it out to Oregon soon there are other poets there that I'm a huge fan of.
You can stay here. I have a guest room. Do it.
Then I will make it a point then next year to show up.
Yes, there are plenty of poets out here that are magical, and I would be happy to host you because I may be able to at least sit in on some amazing recordings.
That's awesome. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been amazing and a pleasure, and you're magical. And yeah, bye.
I want to thank Joshua Merritt again for asking to be on the show. I got to meet him briefly in Albuquerque during the finals event back in April. I was so excited when he asked to be on because I really wanted to get to know him better, and I'm glad that I did. We even talked for about an hour after the microphones were turned off. We shared stories, shared poems with each other. It was just a great experience. If you want to be on the show, you can find me on Facebook under Pen and Poet, or email me directly at rene.mullen@gmail.com. That's rene.mullen@gmail.com. And as always, thanks for listening, and stay safe.